joining us. This is the Planning Commission regular meeting of May 10th, 2023. We'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock.
Chairman, is your microphone on?
We'll do that again. Good evening, everybody. This is the Planning Commission regular meeting of May 10th, 2023. We'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Can I get a roll call attendance, please?
Commissioner Cooley,
Here.
Commissioner Tinker,
Here.
Commissioner Stevens,
Here.
Vice Chair Colindres, Chairman Nathan Smith.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any excused absences?
No, sir.
Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Stevens? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda at this time?
No adjustments.
All right. Any conflicts of interest to disclose? Hearing none. All right, move on to the public comment period. Excuse me. This meeting will be open to the public and conducted in a virtual format to be inclusive of all participation preferences. Public comment participation is encouraged by emailing any comments to the city clerk's office or by calling in using the phone number provided on the front of the agenda. Do we have any public comments tonight?
I have no written requests. Rudy, do we have any callers on the line?
I have no callers on the line.
Item C, action items, public hearings, and requests. Item C1, the approval of the minutes. Everybody had a chance to review. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Cooley,
Yes.
Commissioner Tinker,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Chairman Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, item C2, plot plan PP 2019-0209, conditional use permit 2019-0033, and environmental 2020-0011, commonly referred to as Penn Mart, located on the west side of Pennsylvania Avenue, north of Interstate 10, and south of 6th Street. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Carol Kendrick, Planning Staff, presenting this item. An application was submitted for a plot plan and 2 conditional use permits for a proposed gas station, convenience store with alcohol sales, a drive-through car wash, and a quick service restaurant. It was submitted to the city on June 3rd of 2019. The application is an applicant-sponsored project and not a city-sponsored project. The CUP for alcohol sales was abandoned by the applicant due to the proximity of the existing single-family residences to the west that are inconsistent with ABC's separation requirements. And as you might recall, this item was originally proposed to come before the Planning Commission in February. However, we continued that off calendar. This item was originally advertised on December 24th, 2022 for the February 8th Planning Commission meeting. As I mentioned, it was continued off calendar to resolve some outstanding issues. We did place a public notice in the Press Enterprise and notified property owners within a 300-foot radius for this public hearing on April 28th of 2023. Staff has not received any phone calls or written comments from the public regarding this proposed project. The Beaumont Municipal Code does allow gas stations, convenience stores, drive-through car washes, and quick service restaurants in the 6th Street mixed-use zone subject to a conditional use permit. This property is zoned 6th Street mixed use, and it has a general plan designation of downtown mixed use. All of the surrounding property is also zoned 6th Street mixed use and has a downtown mixed use general plan land use designation. The surrounding uses include the Beyond Beaumont project, which is a similar project to this one that's located to the north. We have the I-10 freeway to the south. We have some non-conforming single-family residences to the west and vacant land to the east. The site is approximately 1.33 acres, and it consists of 2 parcels. It's currently vacant and unimproved. The project has been conditioned to merge the parcels under condition number 21. The project as proposed includes a 3,400 square foot convenience store without alcohol sales and an attached 1,292 square foot quick service restaurant without a drive-through. It does include a detached 2,295 square foot drive-through express car wash. With the gasoline station, they are proposing 6 pumps with 12 fueling positions and a 3,500 square foot canopy. This project will be constructed in 1 phase. The project is proposing a modern style of architecture with varied roofs and building planes to create visual interest. The building height is varied with a range of 21 to 30 feet. The project as proposed will require a minimum of 35 parking spaces. The applicant is proposing 49, not including the 10 spaces that are available under the fueling canopy. The proposed project is proposing a new driveway on Pennsylvania Avenue. This driveway will be limited to right-in, right-out turning movements only. Just as a little background, the project originally proposed 2 driveways. However, the subject site is located with the Caltrans right-of-way, and Caltrans indicated early on that Caltrans highway design standards are applied to their projects that include the acquisition of access control as determined necessary. So more specifically, under the highway design standards, it's section 504.8. Car wash does provide queuing for 6 vehicles, which does not meet the minimum for stacking required in the code, which is 8. However, there is additional stacking provided before the driveway entrance. The gas station, convenience store, and quick service restaurant are proposing a 24-hour operation, and the car wash will have limited hours between 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Deliveries are anticipated to occur 7 days a week between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. Due to the scope of the project, a draft initial study and mitigated negative deck was prepared and circulated for a 30-day public review period from December 24th to January 23rd of 2023. We did receive 3 comment letters. One was from the Beaumont Unified School District, and it was informational regarding school fees. And then we received 2 letters from the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians and the Recon Band of Liseño Indians, stating that they had no comment on the project. The required plot plan and conditional use permit findings can be adequately met and are included in your staff report. So at this time, I'd like to recommend that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing and that the Planning Commission adopt a mitigated negative declaration and a mitigation monitoring and reporting program for ENV 2020-0011 and approve plot plan 2019-0209 and conditional use permit 20-19-003, subject to the proposed conditions of approval, and direct staff to prepare a notice of determination for the applicant to record with the county clerk. This concludes my presentation. I do believe we have the owners here in attendance, and then we have the environmental consultant that prepared the document and the applicant on the phone. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. Excuse me, I'm gonna grab a pen real quick, and then we'll go to questions. We'll start. Commissioner Stevens?
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Cooley?
No questions or comments.
Commissioner Tinker?
Have to push the right. I don't have any questions. Staff's report is pretty adequate.
Okay. All right, I do have a couple of questions and concerns with this. This is a tight site, you know, and only one access point coming in. The traffic study did take a look at that and confirmed that, you know, from a queuing perspective, it'd be right in, right out. Do we have any protection to ensure there's not anybody that's gonna try to make a left turn coming out of the site? Or is that part of a future median, or that's Caltrans, I guess?
There's a portion of the median that will prevent some left turn movements. However, the staff envisions working with the developer to develop a pork chop type
Yeah.
physical barrier to detour a lot of the left-hand turns.
Okay. Yeah, because the driveway's not quite opposite of where the ramp is, it looks like, so no closer to the freeway. And then I know we've got a grade separation project that we're working on. Is there a vertical difference that's going to be, that's going to exist at some point that project moves forward at this location? Imagine if there is, it's small, but is there going to be something there to that?
Yeah, so I did take a look at that. The grade separation plans are currently at a 35% progress. We anticipate them being finalized within a year. As the preliminary profile shows, it's approximately 18 inches higher than what's currently out there now. So in that area, the street will be raised approximately 18 inches. So the pads that are currently shown during final engineering will have to be evaluated with that new height to make sure that the site drains in a safe manner and that it's not inundated with any additional street runoff.
Because that was going to be one of my suggestions is that during the final engineering process that, you know, the applicant should demonstrate that it would be consistent and work with what the future capital project is that exists out there. So thank you for looking at that. And then because this is between the ramp and the freeway, you know, this frontage would actually be, you had to get an encroachment permit from Caltrans, correct? For any improvement in the roadway?
Yeah, for most of the improvements, they would not need an encroachment permit because the right-of-way on the on the west side of Pennsylvania, I believe the Caltrans right-of-way doesn't interfere with their project. However, their traffic control and any other construction-related activities will need an encroachment permit.
Okay.
Additionally, the project is conditioned to contribute to the off-ramp improvements on the east side. However, we don't anticipate those materializing into physical improvements for this project.
Right. Given that there is some Caltrans tie-in and that they can be kind of the long leg of the project schedule, does it make sense to ask to have the encroachment permit issued prior to, you know, grading permit that we would issue from the city? Just to ensure that driveway locations and grades and everything else are going to be workable before we get too far down a construction path?
Yeah, I agree with that. In addition to the construction process and traffic control, there should be some coordination between the applicant and Caltrans in regards to their driveway and kind of finalizing their approval of that driveway location.
Okay. And then we've got a lot of gas stations popping up at intersections right now, and, you know, looking at this zone, I'm not sure that there's a better use for a property at this point, but, you know, feels like we're kind of saturated as far as gas stations go in the city. You know, is there something that we may want to look at that would require for future applications, some separation requirement, or, you know, kind of making sure that we're staying located at key intersections and not drifting into, you know, some of the interior commercial developments?
So we can certainly bring that idea forward to the council for direction, because it would be an ordinance amendment. So we're
Okay.
certainly happy to bring that discussion forward to council and get direction.
Okay. All right, so those are my questions. Where are we at? Open the public hearing then at 6:13. And do you have any requests to speak on this item?
I have no written comments. Rudy, do we have any callers on the line?
I have the applicant over the phone.
Okay, you can go ahead and send them through.
All right, applicant, are you there?
Caller, can you hear us? Caller, can you hear us? Are you there? Can you hear us?
Hi. I'm just on hold in case any comment, if I need to speak at the public hearing.
Okay, we have you on the line with Planning Commission if you have anything you want to state. Go right ahead.
Oh, no, I'm not the applicant. I'm not the applicant.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Can you state your name and who you represent, please?
Okay.
Rudy, do we have any other callers on the line?
I have no other callers on the line.
I believe that was the consultant that prepared the environmental document.
Okay.
Okay, so with no request to speak, we'll close the public hearing then at 6:15. So a couple of things, as far as conditions or modifications go that, I think we could look at one would be to obtain the Caltrans encroachment permit prior to the issuance of a grading permit for the project. The conditions do state in there that the encroachment permit would be required. As we just set a threshold, at what point that would be required. And then the other condition would be to ensure that the site design would work with the future grade separation improvements as they come forward as a recommended additional condition of approval. Is there any other discussion up here? No? All quiet?
Chairman Smith?
Yes.
You had stated about tying the Caltrans permit to the grading plan. Is there any, would it be more appropriate to tie it to the city's encroachment permit for those improvements? Or are you planning on having them, are you wanting to have them encounter Caltrans and get their permit prior to grading for to be as early as possible?
I was thinking it to be as early as possible. I know in previous experience I've had with Caltrans that by the time we get the entitlement, you can actually go to Caltrans for the encroachment permits. Oftentimes they come back and say, no, you can't put this here, it's got to go somewhere else. And I hate to end up in a situation, especially for a site that's as tight as this one, with one access point. If Caltrans denies that particular location and they're already graded on site, or, if it's graded or a building permit gets issued, then we're kind of stuck in this situation of, how are we going to make that work? So that was kind of my thought, was to get it as early as possible so we can avoid that situation down the road. Yeah, I know one example of a shopping center down off of 79 by Temecula that, they built the shopping center and then Caltrans still hadn't improved their access and wasn't going to improve their access. So I just don't want that to be the situation that we get into where it's built and it can't operate because they don't have the ability to get into their site. Okay, well, without anything else, I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve with the addition of
You say just additional conditions.
the additional conditions.
I'll second.
Okay, you have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Cooley,
Yes.
Commissioner Tinker? Yes. Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Chairman Nathan?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, item C3, purchase and sale determination for APN 417-051-001. Staff report, please.
Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, thank you so much for entertaining this item tonight. City of Beaumont was approached by an estate from a gentleman that unfortunately had passed away, and he'd owned this parcel within the city of Beaumont for quite some time. It's on the intersection of 8th, 7th, and Elm Avenue. If that confuses me or confuses you, it also confuses us because it's a three-way intersection and it's a triangle piece. So oftentimes you don't find an intersection that has three streets, but in this scenario we do. It's called out as APN 417-051-001. The city actually owns a similar triangle-shaped property further down on 7th in California, if you're familiar with that area in the Old Town part of Beaumont. It seems to me that these properties were somewhat of a result of realignment of streets when the freeway came through, where you had a block district, and then that was kind of broken up with a swerving freeway that came through the area and kind of created these remnant parcels. So we have two of them. One's owned by the city, one was owned by this gentleman that had passed, and they had reached out to us and said, hey, we don't know what to do with this. It's not viable for any development in terms of residential or commercial or so forth. Would you want to use it as an open space parcel or a park or something like that? And that's what we've been entertaining. They've offered it to us for a reasonable price, and why we're here in front of Planning Commission for such a thing is we found this fun section in the California State Government Code, specifically 65402, that says that when cities want to acquire or dispose of property, the Planning Commission needs to render a report as to the conformity of the land use designation in terms of the general plan with what the intent is of the parcel. So that's why we're here tonight. The Planning Commission is required to file and report as to the conformity of that parcel being acquired by the city. The subject sites consists of roughly 1,300 square feet, a triangle of vacant land. The property is zoned recreation conservation, and it's designated in the general plan as neighborhood commercial. We don't often see discrepancies like that, but in this scenario, we have found one. So that needs to be alleviated so that the general plan and the zoning ordinance are in tandem and not in conflict. So I've attached the aerial photograph of the property, the zoning map that talks about or demonstrates the recreation conservation zoning, as well as the land use map designating the general plan land use designation as neighborhood commercial. So lastly, the city asks, or the staff recommends, that Planning Commission render its report to the property identified as APN 417-051-001 that does not conform with the general land use designation of neighborhood commercial, and direct staff to modify the general plan to correct this inconsistency with the zoning ordinance, and allow us to take this report, discuss it in the council agenda packet in terms of acquisition of this property, and allow staff to move forward with hopefully acquiring this thing. So I can answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
All right, any questions?
I think so. Is the intent then to, they said the city owns a similar triangle-shaped park. So the intent is to turn it into some sort of usable public space?
I think the intent, at least from admin's perspective, is to gain ownership of the park as well as control of, I call it a park, but this vacant parcel, gain control of that so that we know what it's going to be and what it won't be. I think that's the idea, is that there may have been years that we were maintaining it thinking it was ours. If we do own it, we know it'll be maintained, versus a private owner. We're not quite sure what their maintenance is going to be, what their intent of the parcel is. We'd like it to remain this open space lot, but in terms of usability, because it's surrounded on three sides from streets, it's not too usable in terms of like a playground or something like that. So I think that's the intent, is just to gain control of this so that we can maintain it and keep it a nice looking parcel adjacent to our streets.
Yeah.
That operates more as a median than it does a park.
Yes.
Hi, Commission. I was just going to chime in on that. So, yeah, it will not be a usable open space. The location doesn't lend itself to be safely utilized as an actual park space. I believe the city has been maintaining this for years. And so the estate is just trying to essentially give it to us for free. But government code requires we present the report that Kyle presented this evening, and in order to transact on any property. So that's why we're here this evening. So we will keep maintaining it. It won't be used for anything other than currently what it is. And maybe someday way down the road, if we're able to realign the streets and make more sense out of that particular area, the way the streets run, it would it would go away or somehow be reconfigured.
Oh, make a very funny shaped roundabout.
So when you say go away, it could possibly be, paved over or some sort of.
I won't say it's a CIP project even at this point, but again, the 5-point situation is not ideal, as I'm sure Chairman Smith can chime in about. So if down the road at some point, we decided that that area needs to be addressed, it could be removed or it could be leveled or, anything like that to help realign the streets out there. In the meantime, it will stay as is. City will own it since we're already maintaining it.
Thank you.
So the primary purpose that it's come before us is just to change that zoning issue that appears to be an oversight more than anything. There's no intent to do anything with it except status quo, except the city will own it.
Yeah, it's a government code requirement that we have to present. And Carol and I will have to work through the general plan update that we did to find out if this was an oversight in the GIS labeling, that it's been mislabeled in the system, or if it was actually something that was not accurately labeled. So either way, we'll be able to address it through fixing it in the GIS, or if it needs to be part of a general plan amendment, when we take our list of cleanup items back, then we'll incorporate it into that.
Okay, so the GPA wouldn't necessarily have to be done prior to acquisition, it would just need to be as a cleanup item in the future?
Yeah, the government code's weird. It doesn't say that it has to be in conformance. It just says that the planning commission needs to file a report as to its conformance. So you can say it doesn't conform and we can acquire it and then fix that. It's more irking from a staff perspective that the zoning doesn't match the general plan.
Right.
Versus a obstacle to acquisition.
The only question I have is if we've been maintaining it and it's private property, are we recouping any of the costs? Or is it just something that's been going on so long we don't even know about it?
It would be the latter, Commissioner Tinker.
Okay, just.
I don't have any other questions. All right, do you have any requests to speak on this item?
I don't have any written comments. Rudy, do we have any callers on the line?
I have no callers on the line.
Okay, so I will ask for a motion.
Now I'll move that we approve this agenda item, and that's it.
All right. Do you have a second?
Second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Cooley,
Yes.
Commissioner Tinker? Yes. Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Chairman Smith?
Yes. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Promise next time I'll bring you something more interesting.
Yeah, turn it around about, that'll be more interesting. Item C4, administrative draft of the Objective Design Standards Workshop. We'll go with staff report, please.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners, Carol Kendrick, Planning Staff. We are requesting feedback and direction from the Planning Commission for future consideration on the administrative draft of the Objective Design Standards. We actually started this process back in the fall of 2021, but it was at the same time that we were processing the sixth cycle housing element update, and we paused the process of the developing the objective design standards because we anticipated that the housing element may have impacts on those standards. So we were successful in getting the housing element certified by the state on December 12th of 2022. And Program 19 in that sixth cycle housing element does identify that the planning department shall facilitate the adoption of objective design standards for residential and mixed-use projects in order to expedite the approval process for such projects and support the city in meeting its housing goals. The administrative draft of the objective design standards utilized existing development-specific plans, images and observations of existing conditions and built environment, the WRCOG draft objective design standard toolkit, and best practices. The changes are proposed in the residential single-family zone, residential traditional neighborhood, downtown mixed use, 6th Street mixed use, and the 6th Street mixed use residential zone. The recommended standards include facade articulation, compatibility with adjacent buildings, entries, materials and parking design, and access. No changes are proposed to our basic development standards, including density, setbacks, height, lot coverage, parking ratios, etc. And they do not include standards for architectural style, window placement or design, privacy, roof design, and building colors. The administrative draft does comply with the requirements in applicable law, including SB 35 and SB 330. So at this time, we are just soliciting feedback from the Planning Commission, and I did want to let the commission know that we do have this scheduled for a work study with the City Council on Tuesday, and we will be providing a verbal update of what the Planning Commission comments were. And a formal ordinance amendment will be presented at a later date to the Planning Commission and the City Council. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. So for commission, you know, I know I've got some thoughts as we go through this. You know, just kind of pull real quick if everybody else kind of has thoughts as well. All right, so my initial inclination then is, so instead of going from one to the other, is we tackle it by almost kind of a page turn to kind of get through the first ones. That might be the easiest way, so it's easier note taking. If that's good with everybody. Okay, so we'll start with the standards then for the residential single-family zone. Let's see, that'll be section H on page 1. Commissioner Stevens?
Page 1 or page?
Well, it's page 1 of the design standards, 186 of the packet, and page 4 of the.
Got it. Nothing in this section.
Okay.
I have a general question that has to do with the whole thing. Once or should this be adopted, I assume there's a process to update any city code that may be affected by this?
So what, after we receive direction from both the Planning Commission and City Council, we'll work on an ordinance amendment to amend those sections of the zoning code to implement.
So that's intended to be part of this process?
Correct.
Thank you.
I do have one question, sorry. When was the last time this was done?
We don't have objective design standards.
And who initiated this to reach out to get these standards in? Was it staff initiated?
I think it was part of like the zoning code update. Deputy City Manager Taylor may have more information on that. But again, it's part of one of the requirements in our housing element. So
Okay.
again, I think that it was probably anticipated that those were going to come down the line.
Sorry, yes.
So Commissioner Stevens, yes, this was partially staff initiated, and there's also been some discussion about establishing design standards at the council level. So this is part of the housing element. It was one of the tasks that came after getting the housing element done. The state has really pushed on cities and jurisdictions to come up with objective standards to help facilitate housing. And what it does is it takes, from the state's perspective, takes out a lot of the negotiations that take place between cities and developers on various types of housing that could be built. So this is something that the state views as improving equity and helping facilitate and not fast track, but move housing a little bit more quickly. I'll also say this is the very first layer in what you all will see more of over the coming year. We have released a request for proposals to update the zoning code, and City Council has requested that citywide design guidelines be developed as part of that process. So this objective design standards applying just to housing in what Carol referenced is sort of the very first layer. It satisfies one of the programs in our housing element, lets the state know we're trying to work to meet the state's goals in helping facilitate housing, but it's also giving us a little taste of some things we can look at from a foundational level that we can build on as we get into all of the stuff that's going to go into updating the zoning code, which again, you guys will be intimately involved with, I'm hoping, over the next year to 18 months.
Well, personally, and Nathan, you have the advantage because you're an engineer and you deal with this every day.
Mr.
I would
Tinker.
like to see us do a study session.
Your microphone.
My microphone's on now. I'm okay.
There you go.
I would like to see us do a study session, you know, where we can understand everything that we're doing. We've done this with the housing elements in the past. So I would like to, you know, and Nathan has the advantage, and bless his heart, because he's an engineer, but the rest of us that are lay people, I would like to see us either do a study session before the planning commission meeting or have a separate study session so we can thoroughly understand what these changes are and what we're implementing. That would be my desire.
I think we can accomplish some of that here with the workshop tonight, you know, and hopefully try to answer some of the questions.
Well, you can answer them. You can answer them, but
Yeah, Commissioner Tinker, we're not actually asking you to adopt anything tonight, so this is sort of that workshop environment where you're not gonna approve anything, we just wanna talk through and get some feedback. Council, we're gonna do the same thing with them next week, talk through it and get some feedback, and then if we need to do a formal workshop or something like that, we can, or if we take this and, work with it and build on it, you know, as we move forward, we can do that. But yeah, we're not asking you to
Okay,
adopt
Nathan.
anything tonight, so.
okay, Nathan, you get your way here.
Well, I would just like to say a couple things before you start flipping through is one, I think that having some kind of design guidelines for what the expectation of the community is nice to have. Because then you're right, you're not fighting between a developer who wants to put up just a four-wall box and a community that's got a certain set of expectations of what it is that we want as we move forward. So I think it lays the groundwork there very nicely to accomplish that. One thing that I want to ensure that we don't do, however, is limit so much that we don't allow for some innovative design if a homeowner's coming in wanting to do something on there. So it's kind of finding that balance between, you know, enough guidance where we can say this is what we're looking for, but enough to allow an architectural design. So there's a couple of points, you know, specifically I will get to those on there. I think that there's a happy medium for this all to work, but you know, we'll go through there. So I think, Mr. Tinker, for you, for this first page,
Now-
go ahead.
Just before we jump into that, is this based on some uniform, you know, like, we build a lot of codes from a uniform code, standard code. Is this based on that somehow, or is this something was specifically done for Beaumont?
So it's
City.
based on a couple different factors that we indicated in the staff report. And so one of them is the WRCOG, which is the Western Region Council of Governments. They prepared a draft objective design standard toolkit that is, you know, utilized throughout all the jurisdictions within Riverside County. And there were other factors that went into the creation of this that included some of our existing specific plans have their own design standards in them. So our consultant looked at those. They looked at, you know, kind of the built environment, but that WRCOG toolkit is, like I said, that's kind of countywide, and I think that's what most jurisdictions are utilizing.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna have just some clarifying questions as we go through this. And the nice thing is I think once you get through this first one, most of those clarifying questions are gonna apply through everything else in the document as well. But where you have the comment here, elevations facing a street, a minimum of 4 planes. You know, so if I've got, you know, single wall structure, that's 1 plane. If I bring a section back, is that gonna be 2 planes, or does the perpendicular count as a plane as it's looking at the street as well? What's the intent there?
So not the perpendicular, so
Okay.
it's the 4 facing planes.
So there'd be 4 areas of relief on the front of the house as you face the street.
Exactly.
Okay, and so the same for the interior side and rear. You know, we couldn't have a home that's got 80 foot of just a solid wall on one side. There'd have to be some step somewhere along the side wall and the rear yard.
Correct.
And then for corner lots, enhanced architecture on those, for it'd be 4 planes on a street side facing corner as well.
Exactly.
Okay. You good there? I was saying, I'm just looking for a thumbs up. You good?
I'm okay with whatever you're
I like the blank walls, you know, so again, you don't end up with just, you know, alongside. You know, so I appreciate the 20-foot between that. It does allow for some, you know, private area, you know, it's in there for closets and so forth, but not necessarily an entire wall that you can't put a window on. How does that impact with garages, though?
As far as counting as a plane?
Well, counting as, because, I mean, you know, if a garage is 20-foot interior, you might be 22 feet from, you know, where the garage is. If the kitchen's right back behind it, it might be a little bit more, where on that particular section, you're going to have a distance greater than 20 foot unless we're putting windows into garage
Yeah, it would
spaces.
appear that a garage would have to have a window in the garage.
Well, it says without a window or projection, so,
So there could be some, an architectural embellishment or something
Right.
on there.
yes,
Well,
there,
if I may, also, if you have a window in the garage, depending on setback from fire requirement, they may not want that window for the exposure to the next house next to them. That has to be considered. Because I know that when we did a lot of stuff at Sun Lakes, we didn't let windows in the garage because it was, the setbacks were allowed fire to go impinge on the house next to them. So I think that's part of the fire requirement.
So if they had a corner embellishment, let's say a different material that kind of wrapped around the corner of the house, and then you had a gap to what the next window was, would that still meet the overall objective to not have a blank wall?
I don't think like a material wrapping, like a wainscoting around the corner, I don't think that that would qualify, but, I mean, they can have pop-outs, sometimes you see that, or they can do a change of material. I mean, there's a lot of different options, so it
Okay.
provides some flexibility for staff to work with the applicant. It doesn't necessarily to be a window.
Okay. Okay. Because again, I just want to make sure we have the flexibility in there, that we're not trapping anything.
Yeah, it does say window or a projection.
Right.
So,
Offset or recess of the building wall, at least 1 foot in depth, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Chairman, could
I agree with Nathan.
After he's done.
We need to make sure that whatever we adopt, but there's still flexibility with the design. So there is some, if a designer comes in with something a little different, we're not so hard fast that you can't do this. I want us in this design to be able to say, hey, okay, we can work with you. You know, there's certain criteria we're gonna meet, but let's just not tie it down so hard that we can't work with the developers.
Sorry, can I recommend something just for anyone watching the video? Would you mind putting the standards on your screen and we'll get it projected? And that way, anyone at home can follow along. Right now, it's
Yes.
just the room.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I just want to make sure you were queued up and then we can get it on the screen.
Okay. One thing that I could suggest, Commissioner Tinker, is on the ones that you feel are unflexible, we could remove those and have them be part of the design guidelines. So with the objective design standards, this will be a code amendment and will be a requirement, but with design guidelines, those are guidelines, and staff has flexibility in working with the applicant on those.
I gotta push the button there. Yeah, that's, that's all I'm concerned about is, you know, we have guidelines, but I don't want some guy to come in and want to develop something and then we say, oh, no, we can't do that. If he has a viable alternative. That's all I'm concerned about.
Yeah, and for the blank wall, I think it's garages is mostly going to be impact. I think for the structure of the house, you know, we don't want to go more than 20 foot, you know, because it just breaks it up and makes it look nicer, but.
And we do have something similar in the downtown area plan. There's, some of that speaks to large planes on, of course, it's commercial buildings, right, that it's referring to, but the same idea, the same concept is to, you know, break up some of that long building that just,
Right.
you know, gets
Yeah.
isn't as aesthetically pleasing as it could be.
It's not. And then, I mean, tandem garages are mentioned later in there. I mean, that's even more. You could end up with 30 feet or 40 feet that's, blank wall in that first one, where some kind of outcropping or, protrusion, even if it's just architectural, would be helpful along there. Any other comments on,
Yeah, on the roof design D2. I'm wondering what the purpose of this is. I think that's a stylistic thing that changes over the years. If I'm understanding the way this is written, it's saying that if they have eaves, that they can't enclose those eaves and cover up those beams. Now, that's popular now, but a few years ago, everybody covered all of those exposed beams. Is there an architectural or a structural reason why this is, or is this a stylistic? I don't see any purpose.
I would add to that in high fire areas, one of the mitigations is that you do have to enclose the beams. So you can't trap any,
Yeah.
anything underneath it.
I was gonna mention that, hey, we tell everybody you're in a high fire hazard, and basically Beaumont Planning's in a high fire hazard. And, okay, I'm doing it. To enclose the eaves, we tell them, that's one of the things we do for mitigation, is to enclose your eaves. Okay, I got it.
So would the commission recommend just striking after all the language after depth?
Well, I would even just say you could just put in cases for exposed eaves that they would require to have, if the underside is exposed, but allow for it to be enclosed as well. Any other comments on that first page? All right, we'll move on to the next page, entrances. Personally, I like this because it's going to help with the 4 planes as well, is to have a recessed or an extended entry coming into the house. Again, just providing architectural relief and something that's a little nicer to look at visually from the street. Any comments on entrances at this point? It doesn't require the entrance to necessarily be covered, does it? I didn't see that in there, but okay. I'm using in certain styles, you wouldn't necessarily have it covered, so, okay. Rear access? Any comments? Nope.
One, now I'm assuming what this in essence does is would prohibit a rear access actually being on a side on a 0 lot line. Because you're not gonna have 6 feet. And so it means it's gonna have to enter into the backyard. I don't see that as a problem, but a clarification for
Well, I think it
for
also
my
helps that
concept.
a builder wouldn't be able to come in and put their sliding door in,
Yep.
where you step into dirt.
Yep,
And,
Yep.
and that's the intent. As planning has been going out and doing the single-family home inspections, the assistant planners have been out on these developments quite a bit, and there's no landing. I mean, you have these huge sliding glass doors and you step out into dirt, and so I know that there's always an option for them to, get patios or a concrete poured, but just having that landing, I think, is reasonable.
Okay, building materials? I like that corrugated metal is not permitted. Now, I mean, let's say there is a architectural, or it's not, the wall on there, but, maybe there's, around a plant or around a corner or something like that, as an architectural feature, but not a exterior wall material, would something like that be permitted? Or is it just strictly, it's out? Because I could see like a brewery or, something like that may have they want to have the industrial feel. We don't want a corrugated metal building, which I believe is what the intent is with this is.
Well, and remember,
that,
this
but-
is just gonna be residential.
Oh, right,
So
okay,
when we do the citywide design guidelines, we will address the commercial and industrial, and I'm sure that will become a
Yeah.
a very robust conversation with lots of discussion. But this will be just for residential.
Okay.
Will the corrugated metal building be involved with an outbuilding?
So I suppose if it required a permit, then yes, it would be, if it was like an ADU, because again, I think this is intended to address habitable structures, your residential structures, so it would apply also to an ADU,
Okay.
not a
Like a shed.
shed in the backyard or, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
I was thinking an ADU.
yeah.
I'm turning it on. I was thinking of an ADU, you know, somebody wants to do a different roofing style or side style. So, but then these standards would apply everywhere.
Yes.
Thank you.
I do appreciate the comment that the exchange material shall be at an inside corner, so we don't have these changes in the middle of walls.
And the fact that we have to specify that.
Yeah,
means
that's-
It's happened before.
It does, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know, there's some houses that were painted where it just seemed like there was a random stripe in the middle of a, yeah.
Or sometimes where you have the parapet on the front where it just, it doesn't wrap, I mean, on commercial buildings, so that's something that, you know, we're always looking for.
Okay. Any other comments on building materials?
You know, I think most of the building materials we know are already covered by the building code. And
Yeah.
other than the fact that we want to tell them, okay, you can't put pink or yellow or whatever, but it's all covered by the building code.
Okay. Windows. I know I brought up a couple of items earlier on windows. You know, the specification, I still don't know how to pronounce that word, is it muntins? You know, the, that, yeah, all right.
There's a whole backstory in the planning department on that.
So my comment on that is that, you know, if I look at some of the architecture that was done at Altus, for example, they've got just the windows that are flush with the front of the house around the corners, you know, as an architectural design. And I worry that this section might be going maybe a little too far into some of the details on it. Like, I understand that we just don't want a wall with the flat window on it, but if it works with the architectural design and the theme overall, then, you know, I think there should be some flexibility. I don't know how we write that yet.
Well, one of my suggestions would be, we could put language at the end of 5A that says, or is approved by the community development director or the
Okay.
planning commission, if that's your choice.
I mean, I trust you. If someone's coming in with a, you know, a modern farmhouse type look or something like that, that, you know, you're not going to have kind of that country, oh, maybe modern farmhouse is a bad example, but, you know, mid-century modern, you know, take on that, if it's consistent with the architectural design and the intent of the house, I would trust planning department to be able to make that call.
I agree with you. That doesn't need to come back to the planning commission. The planning department should be able to make that decision.
But I do want to make sure, because it was brought up, that we do have the ability that if someone proposes a certain type of window on their architecture, that they should have to install that certain type of window.
Agreed.
Yes. I think, I don't know.
Grids,
Grids.
window grids.
All right. Any other comments on windows? All right, we've got section 6 is 360-degree design. So is that, I'm not sure I quite understand, you know, that says that all buildings must be designed where each exterior wall is designed with equivalent to the primary facade in the extent of articulation, level of detail, quality of materials. So if we require 4 planes on the front of the building, does that then also say the 360 requires 4 planes on the side?
Well, no, because in the other section, it's 2.
Right.
It's 2 on the interiors and the rear. I think that this intent is just to carry some of the architectural features and the materials around the entire building, because what we see a lot of times is planted on the front, and then you see
Yeah,
nothing
nothing.
on the side to the rear. So it's just incorporating
Okay.
just the building materials and design.
Okay.
Or you have the eyebrow, or the metal crossbar, or,
Right.
you know, you get the one,
My house has a couple of those eyebrows.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think mine didn't even get any, so.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure, we're not going too far with that. It sounds like if the intent is just to ensure that there's architecture considered all the way around, then
Right.
we're good there.
Correct.
Okay. Parking design and access. We're setting 20 feet, so we don't have to deal with I want a 16-foot driveway because my sidewalk is adjacent to the curb.
Yeah, and I know that particular issue has come up at council several times, so I think we don't, the intent is not to have vehicles hang out into the sidewalk or the street.
Yeah, I anticipate on A3, there will probably be additional discussion at council depending on what all you discuss, but like planning manager said, there's ongoing discussion regularly about the depths of the driveways and how the streets and the neighborhoods function because of that with lack of usable driveway space.
This is single family, so I'll save the question for townhomes then. Alley load townhomes. Okay. Any questions or comments on garages?
Yes. When we go on to number D2, carports must be solar ready. Concept is good, but that's increasing the cost tremendously, and yet the house may be perfectly viable to put solar on the roof of the house, and do we really want to? Well, from what I've been seeing, we're gonna double, triple, maybe even 4 times the cost of a carport, when the intent, most likely on a carport, is to cut costs. Or now we're gonna require every carport to be super heavy duty.
Or having meeting the standards to accommodate solar, so I think it's probably the design. We could add language in that just says carports are recommended to be solar ready, and then just.
Yeah, I like that. We've looked at them in Four Seasons, and they've talked about installing carports for the sole purpose of putting solar on. Those costs are 4 times what a normal one would be, and the typical aluminum that we see attached to houses, they're not going to support that weight. So it's a tremendous cost factor, and I think designers that look at carports versus garages, it's to save money.
And I mean, so we could make that proposed change, or it might be something that's in the design guidelines where there's flexibility.
Yeah.
That they should be solar ready.
Well, because we're required to have a certain amount of solar for new construction anyway, right? So, if they can't meet it on the roof, then they'd have to meet it on the carport.
Yeah, the building code now requires that solar be on any new construction for residential, so
Right.
the houses are all gonna, if it's a new construction, the houses will come with it. If it's a modification, then that's where you get into some of the
Right.
issues that we could see here. If it's an old carport, and they're rehabbing part of the house and, it gets into a different type of conversation. And typically we don't see new, single-family homes built with carports because we require the 2-car
Yeah,
garage.
that's that question.
So the carport conversation, I think, comes more into play with your multifamily apartments where we might have covered parking that's required or something to that effect. And then it's on a different scale. You're not talking about just a single-family home with a carport, because we're gonna require the 2-car garage anyway.
Yeah, I can see this for if someone's putting an ADU in, maybe putting a carport for an extended driveway or something like that to serve the ADU, but
Right.
yeah.
And since we
Right.
can't require additional parking for ADUs anymore anyway,
Yeah.
it would be something that could work as a recommendation, maybe. If you're gonna put one, we recommend that it be solar ready, since we can't mandate that you put new parking
Right,
in for it anyway.
okay. Outdoor lighting, all exterior doors must be illuminated with outdoor light fixtures. Oh, okay, so that's not just, so there'd be carriage lights and a light above the entry or something like that.
Right, and that's one of the issues that the planners have been finding as they've been doing the single-family home inspections, is there's no lights outside of some of the doors, which, is a safety issue in our opinion.
So carriage lighting would still be required to be dark skies compliant though, right? It would have to be shielded down?
Yeah,
It references 8.5, which is the outdoor lighting standard, speaks to
Yeah.
the dark sky. So yeah, generally shielded or below a certain lumen, not bleeding into your neighbor's yard or anything like that.
So that's, any other comments there on, for a single family? All right, so we have a residential traditional neighborhood zones. This would be for multifamily housing, this next section then, correct?
Well,
Or-
it's not necessarily multifamily, it's just higher density than single family, but not as high as our standard multifamily. So it
Okay.
just allows, I believe, up to like 7 dwelling units per acre instead of 4 that are allowed in the single family. And it allows other types of products that townhomes and courtyard products and things of that nature.
Okay. So again here for building scale and massing, along the front and side facade, fourth story must be stepped back a minimum of 6 feet. I appreciate that, so we don't end up with these, you know, long, tall blocks. You get some relief as you move forward. The graphic that's there, it shows 24 foot and the 45-degree angle. Is that for, so that would be a 24 foot, well, I guess that could be 3 stories, right? That's a short 3 stories, it's 8 foot, you know? So is that 24 foot, is that intended to be for the 3-story height?
Well, so that,
I think it's intended to just address the massing
Just the massing?
in general.
Yeah.
So because it's not quantifying it as whether or not it's 2 stories or 3 stories, right? So I think you could, I think it's meant to address the massing. Just once you hit that 24-foot height, you're gonna need to step it back.
So if I'm along a street, 3 floors have to have a setback. If I'm adjacent to existing single-family homes, 24 feet, and then I have to have,
I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
I think it would work
Okay.
that way.
What's our height requirement now?
So we have, depending on the zone, 35 feet.
or 2
Or
stories.
2 stories. In the downtown area where some of the mixed use can take place, do we go up to 40 or 50 feet now? Something like that. We're still not typically seeing a lot of that product. You know, once you get over that 3-story, your construction type changes, as you guys, I'm sure, are well aware. So the cost, from what we've heard from developers, even across the board, whether they're doing market rate or lower income, subsidized of any kind, has said that they can't make it pencil for that. And I do think we're a number of years out before we actually see anything come in that's gonna really be
Well,
over.
I know on some of the commercial,
3
we
stories.
went a little higher out on Fourth Street, but residential, we haven't seen that yet.
No.
Okay,
No.
thank-
And that on Fourth is the manufacturing, so,
Right.
you know, it's a different, yeah.
We just made them dig a hole.
Right. We'll let you go at 10 feet, you gotta go down 12 first though, right? Yeah.
any other questions there on the scale and massing? All right, for building design? Comments or questions there? So I like the articulation. I think that'll look good. The facade elements exhibit, it's on the next sheet. So does it require that, you know, for example, you got a continuous parapet, continuous cornice, it's you must have an element is what we're trying to get to. It's not as specifically that we need to have a cornice or and a parapet, right? It's just that there needs to be something to separate the floors and something to separate the roof.
Correct. So it does state that it may be accomplished through these several different options, which include a change in color, change in material of cornice, change in pitch, gable or upper story step deck. So
Okay.
it does provide that flexibility.
Okay.
on E, under privacy, an explanation of why we wouldn't allow floor-to-ceiling windows?
So within 10 foot of a property line abutting a lower
lower.
intensity residential zone. So it'd be on the side of a building, essentially, not
Right.
street facing, but side of the
Side of a
building
building.
Right.
to a
And you-
lesser intense zone.
Right, and so if you're in an upper story, then you've got visibility into people's,
Yeah, you can see that from the window that starts
Yeah.
3 feet up.
yeah.
I'm just not sure I understand why we would limit somebody.
And typically, we don't see floor-to-ceiling windows, so.
You don't, but you could.
That's true.
I think once you get over, 5 or 6 floors maybe, but, I think for,
Yeah.
yeah.
And again, number F, the eaves, we changed that on the single family. I think the same would apply here.
I think the exhibit on the next sheet really kind of exemplifies what we're looking for. So it's not just a single continuous roof lying across the entire structure. Okay. Any other comments on roof design? All right, transparency and blank walls. I don't know what is not a transparency wall, right? Or is that? I'm not sure I understood what the terminology for transparency was.
I'll have to double check on that. I'll
Yeah.
get with our consultant on that. but-
Yeah, I understand the blank walls. I'm just not sure
Yeah.
what the transparency term relates to. I think the guidelines in there make sense.
I'll get some clarification on that.
Okay. Okay, any other comments on there? Building materials? This is the same building materials list that was on the previous. Okay. And then windows, I think the same comment that we had previous would apply. Multifamily buildings must take one of the following forms: a porch, a stoop, a dooryard, and I am not familiar with that term. Covered dooryard frontages with dimensions. So is that more of like in a townhome, you might have like a 42-inch wall with a gate or something on it? Is that kind of maybe what that's?
Individual covered,
The drawing does kind of show that,
Right.
yeah.
And I think the different terms just coincide with the different sizes, like you can
Yeah.
see the porch, 12 feet, and then you get to stoop, you have 5 to 8 feet, and then dooryard, minimum 6 feet, or 4 to 8 feet, right? So,
Like I say, on townhome projects, I know those dooryards, they can look really nice. And it is a nice way to hide a barbecue. Excuse me. Okay, good, there is a private storage space requirement. And is that already in code, or is that just reestablishing it?
it is.
Yeah. Okay, and then, any other comments on that item? I've stopped asking questions. Okay, usable open space design. And this is already in code as well for multifamily housing, that they would have to have private open space, correct?
Correct.
So a lot of that is just restating what's already part of our code.
Right, and clarifying it as well.
Okay. Same with pedestrian access and circulation, that's just restating what we're already requiring.
I think this provides a little more detail, than what's currently in the code.
Okay. Any comments or questions on those sections? Parking design and access. This one gets tricky. So structured parking levels facing right-of-way, where ground level structured parking occupies more than 30% of the building facade. The finished floor must be a minimum 4 vertical feet below the finished grade at the building facade. That's just so, it's nice, not the 10-foot
Look
of
at,
just,
right.
okay. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think we're probably several years away from that product type being feasible.
And the terrain here too, depending on what, we've got fault lines that run through here and other stuff. So really, it's gonna be a very specific project in a very specific location.
Right.
To fit that actual criteria, but it could happen,
It could,
so.
yeah. But podium construction is just really expensive to do in any form, so. Okay. All driveways or other paved parking areas located in the front setback are 18 feet. Tandem parking. Do we have so for an alley load townhome per se, right? You might end up with like a 3-foot approach into a garage. Is that, I didn't see a provision necessarily in here that would allow for that. It's not a public street, so, those setback requirements from there wouldn't apply. But you do see that a lot with the townhome product that is that real short 3-foot, 5-foot driveway.
Yeah, and if it's alley loaded, then it's not the front setback anyway, so
Okay.
it would be. this
So an
would
alley
apply
load
to
product
that.
would still be able, with these design guidelines, to be able to still accommodate that type of design?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions on parking?
I do, if we're moving down to bicycle parking, I'm glad to see that. That's gonna become definitely more of an issue. Short-term, A2A, short-term secure bicycle parking must be located outside of pedestrian parking ways and within 100 feet of the main entrance to the building it serves. What are we defining as secure parking? Are we talking about a pipe in the ground they can chain it to, or is this secured as a building or whatever? 100 feet can be pretty difficult to meet.
So it could be the racks, or sometimes they have the lockers that are available. So I think there's a lot of different options that a developer could utilize in order to meet that requirement.
Now, would this apply for like a townhome unit where you've got a porch, a stoop, or a dooryard? Are you still required to have this parking at the 100-foot intervals, or is this intended more for a true multifamily type building where you're going to have limited access points and entries?
That's what I would envision it for.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, and then the long-term parking, bicycle parking. Okay, no, don't have any more questions on that.
Okay.
That does make some of the existing racks not usable, but absolutely necessary to have that 2 feet clearance, so I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Any other questions for the transitional neighborhoods? Okay. The downtown mixed-use zone. This is where things get interesting. All right, so setbacks in yards. No front yard setback is required for commercial uses. 5-foot maximum, or 5-foot maximum setback for residential development. So for any residential development in the downtown mixed-use zone, the idea is to get it as close to the right-of-way as possible.
Correct.
You want to front to the street closely. Okay. And a minimum of 40 feet for above-ground parking. So it's parking structures is what's intended for, or is that surface parking or elevated parking? Setback for above-ground parking may be waived on other findings.
I think the intent of that is to keep it from having the parking structure on the street.
Yeah,
So you want the building in front,
Parking in the rear.
parking in the rear. Nobody wants to look at
Right.
parking necessarily.
This is much more of a traditional downtown,
Right.
yes.
Yeah, and as we progress through what Kyle's working on in economic development with the downtown revitalization plan and with the objective design standards and the future zoning code updates and additional design guidelines, hopefully all of this comes together at the same time so that we have a good picture of here's where we're trying to go with this specifically to the downtown.
Okay. And then we have the supplemental standards for wall plane modulation. The same thing, it's just different ratios and different distances. Okay. Any comments on the wall plane modulation? And the same thing with the cornices or some kind of difference between floors, top of the building. I think the direction on that would be the same as previous, if there, which was not much. Any questions or comments on there? Ground floor height. Non-residential ground floor level height must be a minimum of 11 feet. Okay. Floor to ceiling height must be a minimum of 11 feet. Is there a standard for commercial? Or, and obviously, if I was walking in a commercial building at 8 foot, that would feel like ridiculously tiny. I was gonna say, you know, I'm trying to think of most places you go into. I can't think of a lot that wouldn't be at 10 foot or greater.
And the code doesn't call it out right now
No.
in this level of detail.
Right. Okay.
I
So-
think the intent of this is to encourage a commercial
Right.
look on the ground floor, right? So you're gonna get the taller windows, you're gonna get a little better look of, oh, here's a restaurant, here's a retail store.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be distinctly different than maybe a floor above it that might be residential or something else.
Okay. So non-residential ground floor height may not differ from the height of any adjacent non-residential use by more than 2 feet. Well, that's kind of what I'm trying, you know, if we do have, you know, what's the restaurant, you know, at the corner of Los Palacios?
Casa Palacios.
Casa
yeah.
Palacios. I mean, that's a fairly low building on there. You know, if someone come in that wanted to have something that was higher mast, you know, is there a way, you know, if somebody wanted to come in with 12 or 13 feet, you know, would they be limited that they would not be able to do that because of that statement?
Yeah, I mean, based on this, they would have to be within the 2 feet. Yeah, and I don't know if that's something that could be addressed by design or if we need to make this a recommendation.
Yeah, if everybody's starting at 11, yeah.
Starting at 11,
Yeah,
what happens if someone wants to go 14,
right.
then the next one has to go.
Right,
The existing frame.
yeah.
But then there's options for minor variance, modification of standards, or variance.
So there are, yes, but, you know, my concern is an architect's gonna pull this, and then that's gonna be the basis of the building design, and not asking for, you know, is there a variance that might be allowable? So maybe there's a comment there again, it's like, you know, or as, approved by the community development.
Yeah, and really, when we look at something like that, we are looking at the general scale. How does everything
Right.
work together? We go out there, we look, if it's gonna be not,
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't want something that's gonna be this big 18-foot, you know, where everything else is kind of a lower area around it.
yeah.
Or if everybody's 11 or 10, they wanna build at 8, you know, we'll go the opposite way and really make it feel uncomfortable.
And we also don't want to preclude somebody who might have a fabulous use, fabulous building that they want to bring in and have them not be able to do it either.
Yeah. Okay. All right, any other questions on ground floor? Okay, building transparency and required openings.
need a little clarification of what I'm reading here. I'm seeing that there's a trend to eliminate openings into retail places. So you're no longer going to see these big display windows, just because the thing is, boom, you pop out the window, grab the stuff and run. But if we're saying they have to have 50% of the building wall, an opening, a door or a window, are we gonna run into problems there? 50% is a lot. And, you know, all I have to do is look at the clothing stores, the jewelry stores, that what's real common right now is walk up with a sledgehammer, smash it, jump in, and you've cleared the place out before anybody can respond even to an alarm.
And those windows aren't cheap.
And they are not cheap.
But at the same time, you know, when the party supply place turned into the vet clinic, you know, now it looks incredibly barren when they just have just
Yes,
the door.
and I'll grant you that too. But is this going to encourage a bunch of places putting in bars on the windows because they have to have windows? And that looks worse.
We're not putting bars on windows, sir.
No, I would agree, but
Right.
you're gonna see that creep if you're telling them they've got to have windows.
We can revisit that percentage requirement and maybe look at some options to reduce it or make it a recommendation in some regard. But you're correct in somewhere between the vet clinic and
Right,
a complete wall of windows is the right answer.
right, exactly. You know, it's
Right,
just,
and maybe the windows can be 6 feet off the ground or halfway up to where they're not accessible, but rather than the concept you think of with commercial is they're grounded to roof.
okay. All right. Any other comments there on, oops, what am I doing? Any other comments there for that section? Enhancement on blank walls. So again, there we'd be looking for something on that wall. So the vet clinic would have, you know, I would feel bad picking on them. But, you know, they would have had to put something on there that, you know, okay.
Some sort of articulation.
Now, what about, like a public mural? You know, we've got the barber shop or something that's down there. If it was a public artwork instead of a opening.
So if I recall correctly, there is some fine line in the mural / public art world that hinges on the free speech end of things. So we will actually have to visit with the city attorney's office
Okay.
on if we were gonna craft something along those lines where how far can we go with that, right? Do we want to encourage it and allow it, or can we even regulate it? So, because that has come up before. And public art in the sense of like, you know, a sculpture or structure or something, that's a different conversation, obviously. But when you're talking
Murals.
there's certain aspect of that that's considered under the free speech.
Yeah.
And it depends on if they're promoting like their business, it's,
It gets
Commercial
sticky.
versus non-commercial, yes. Yeah, there've been some Supreme Court case rulings in the last 5 or 6 years that have kind of dove into commercial versus non-commercial and how that all plays
Okay.
out.
Yeah, they don't necessarily want Sweetie Todd all over the place, but
But we still want to see the mural when we go to the donut shop.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right, and so therein lies the issue, right?
Exactly.
How do you approve one and not the other?
Right.
Yeah.
So would there then, so if somebody came by and let's say, you know, they were going to do signage, so they wanted, you know, they had a larger blank wall, they want to be permanent, so it was going to be tiled as part of the architecture, maybe it had something on there that wasn't just, okay, we're just going to put some tiles on here, but something that's actually artistic in nature. Is that approved as part of the architecture, or does that kind of fall into the same sticky category?
it's kind of sticky, and one example that I can provide is like with Raising Cane's. So, you know, they have the big artwork with the dog, and I mean, it's just art, but it's also their brand. So they actually came in and did a modification to the sign program for that. But again, it's like on a case-by-case basis and really kind of the scope of what they're proposing and if it's part of their branding and the message.
I do think this is written where it's specific enough. I think we would say, okay, a pattern of insets, obviously that's some articulation structurally. Building base, cornice, you know, height differential there, landscaping, trellises or lattices, right? Those kind of things. So it does give some specific criteria for what would be considered an enhancement on a Blake wall.
Okay.
Could someone come in with an art or mural request? Yes, and then we would, again, having the same conversation with
Right.
how do we walk that fine line without violating free speech, but also maintaining some sort of integrity of what the code and the intent of the design guidelines are.
Is there a concern with, you know, we are going to be articulating along the front that we're creating pockets for undesirable activities?
So
Or, you know, overnight sleeping?
public safety will have an opportunity to look and weigh in on this as well.
Okay. Okay.
That is something that has come up in conversation.
Okay. Any other comments there? Generally parallel to streets and pedestrian walkways, that's always good. Any other comments there on sections 5, 6, or 7?
Yeah. On building entrances, 4B, seems arbitrary. We're not seeing a lot of it currently, but we certainly will. You get work, live sites, moving the door down 30 feet. The building use may not be 30 feet. Seems kind of an arbitrary distance.
So this is in the mixed-use zone, so I think it's not intended for like the live work, but more for the, where you've got a true mixed use, where you've got, you know, maybe commercial on the, or retail on the first floor, and then residential on upper floors. But we can add at the end, not including live work units.
Even if it's not a live work, if you have a first floor that's a retail and they've got an apartment upstairs and the building's 40 feet wide, I don't see any reason why there needs to be that minimum of 30 feet, or if the building's only 30 feet wide. It seems arbitrary.
Okay. I see that point. Okay.
We could add that, the language or is approved by the community development director, where we can look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I mean, because you could end up with all kinds of, you know, if someone's proposing a building and then all of a sudden they're going to split the suite in half because that's whether it's leasable, then, you know.
Right, and a number of the parcels in the downtown area they do tend to be more narrow.
Yeah.
Than not. So in theory, the idea would be we have lot consolidation and then build a larger scale project that would be conducive to having multiple retail and multiple residential, but that's not to say someone couldn't come through and build, so valid point.
All right, any other comments on sections 4, 5, 6, or 7? All right, number 8 is additions and remodels to be consistent. Number 9 and 10, so 9 is pedestrian access and circulation. Again, this seems to be kind of just restating what ADA policy already requires and building design already requires is quick, easy, fastest path of travel, so. Okay. Number 10 is public open space requirement. And this is, again, restating consistent with our current development guidelines or enhancing our development guidelines.
So I was thinking about this more as it has come up. So the requirements are in the multifamily zoning section of the code. And so
Okay.
multifamily is not included in the objective design standards because Most of these requirements, or some of them, are in there. So this is just carrying these over to the other zones that
Okay.
don't have it in there.
Okay.
Or refer back to.
So it's
the multi-
taking what we have for multifamily and applying it to where it's a use that's very close to.
Correct.
Okay. Parking design looks to be fairly consistent with what the previous section was as well. Maximum of one curb cut for driveway access may be permitted per street frontage per development project site. All right, let's say the swap meet sells, they come by with a large project. You know, that would seem very restricted to them to say that they should only have one driveway access potentially. You know, I get it for like downtown, especially where we have the real narrow lots, we don't want to permit, you know, more than one. Yeah, is there a threshold on there that we might want to say per X foot of property frontage?
I would actually, if I were gonna, I would defer to public safety on that, honestly, because a lot of times fire wants to see more than one point of access, or PD wants to see more than one point of access. The swap meet example, they're actually further down in the local commercial zone, so
Right,
this
right. It wouldn't apply
wouldn't
specifically.
apply,
but
right?
I was just trying to think of a big undeveloped piece of property.
Well, here's one of the problems. I live on a lot that's 90-foot wide. And I need a second driveway access, but I currently can't get it. I think based in residential area, we should be able to do that. There should be the availability to have that second curb cut.
We just had issues with the gas station that we were looking at, that initially it was 2 driveway accesses, and then Caltrans made us turn it back, so it's kind of a conflicting here.
Yeah, but if
If they can
you're
only have one, why were we looking at them needing 2?
two, you know, guys, on a residential or mixed use, if it's a 60-foot lot, you don't want to have 2 20-foot driveways that are taking up, you know.
Yeah, because it really is gonna probably be a project by project, because Chairman Smith, you know, with the conflicting movements or.
Yeah.
Or separation between the driveways and the public safety.
Right.
I mean, it's gonna be a case by case, so.
Or
what is-
adjacent property
Well-
owners if they're right on each other.
One of the problems we have is we have old Beaumont and new Beaumont as far as development goes. Old Beaumont, our lots are 90-foot wide and 200-foot deep. And they're designed so that you actually could have a second driveway access. So I'm just saying that there needs to be the ability to look at that and not just say you can't have it.
But the downtown mixed use, that's Sixth Street frontage, correct? You know, it doesn't extend back to, well, I guess it does extend to like Fifth.
But we're talking about residential more than commercial.
Right, well, this specific one is just for the downtown mixed use zone.
Which means it could be either and or both.
Right,
Yeah,
So,
because in downtown mixed use, you still have old-time Beaumont lots
yeah.
that are wide and deep.
Mhm.
that people look at.
so would you be comfortable if we added language as approved, or as approved by the Community Development Director, Public Works Director, and Public Safety?
I would think so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. It just,
Right, or maybe the Development Review Committee.
Yeah, pass it to that,
Because
right,
right, these projects are gonna go through Development Review Committee regardless.
right.
Which is Planning Manager, Public Works Director, Fire Marshal.
well, I give you a prime
Police
example.
lieutenants,
In my
you know.
neighborhood, a gentleman went to the city and said, I'd like to have a curb cut because the way my property is, I can put my vehicles in the back of my house off a paved street. He said, no, you can't have it. And it went on for several years, and then finally he was able to get it. And basically what it did was he took the vehicles off the street and put them in the back of his house where he wanted them to start with. So there needs to be some flexibility in there, you know?
Right, bicycle parking? Any other additional comments on that? It looks to be that's the same recommendations from before. Okay. And then the last two sections, 6th Street mixed use zone and 6th Street mixed use residential. Are those just haven't been developed yet? Is that kind of the next stage? You know, is it pulling from shall meet all the requirements of this previous zone plus this, or I'm just trying to.
They may, the other development standards may already be in the code, but I'll double check on both
Okay. Okay. Yeah, just some references to, you know, where they exist elsewhere.
Because we did adopt these
Right.
new zoning designations when we adopted the general plan. So we will cross-check those standards and make sure they're just pulling through.
Well, that's fine. I mean, it's just, it says the following standards shall apply and it only lists the two. So I mean, it shall apply in conjunction with, you know, whatever was adopted
it's-
elsewise.
I just pulled up the code, so it is, the lot area is pulling through the same.
Okay. Yeah, we just refer back to whatever was adopted for design standards on those
Yeah.
by reference. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I do on, but it's going back to the residential part. I'm not sure if this is the right design standards to mention this, but on the walls, specifically, we're going to, let's say Sundance, where the walls are built entirely on the residential property, even though they're public facing. So you have a wall and then city-owned property right next to it. Therefore, the homeowner is responsible for the upkeep of both sides of the wall, essentially. Is this the right, and it has caused, you know, obviously inconvenience and debate. And I don't know if Sundance is just an anomaly or a mistake, but is this the right document to mention that perhaps the wall needs to be built on the property line instead of inside the property, so that it's half city, half homeowner?
I think the zoning code update is probably a better place to have that conversation than just in this, because places like Sundance, Tournament Hill, Solera, Four Seasons, all the places that have the perimeter block walls, are not, this is not addressed in this.
They're not subject to
type of
this
development.
because they're specific plans, so they have their own requirements, but that's something we could look at. But if it's something where someone's wanting to come in and develop one lot with a single-family home, typically what we see is if they're doing a block wall, it's usually going to straddle the property line with their neighbors, with approval from the neighbors. So I guess it might be where we put something in it for tract development, that walls are built on property lines, because, like I said, my concern is if we put it in the single-family zone, it is going to apply across the board for properties that are not in a specific plan. And like I said, typically we see them they straddle property lines.
You say your maintenance staff is not gonna like having walls straddling a property line.
Right, well, and so this, what I was gonna, because I know exactly what Commissioner Stevens is concerned with, because code enforcement deals with property owners and HOAs and the whole collective of people who have to deal with the maintenance on the walls. The bigger question is gonna be that, so if we say, okay, it has to be built on half on the property line and half not, so who's gonna then take ownership of maintenance? Is it gonna fall to the HOA? Is it gonna fall to a master developer in the CCNRs? Is it going to be the city that then incorporates the cost for that in a CFD or maintenance fund somehow, because there's cost associated with that? And understandably so, a lot of residents, I think, do purchase not understanding that they have to maintain that exterior part of the wall as well. And I can absolutely see how that's the case, because you have the adjacent landscaping that's part of the HOA maintenance, and you think, oh, it all goes together. And we have had these issues in other master plan developments, so it's not just Sundance where it is an issue, but it's a valid concern that I think during the zoning code update, we probably would have to establish some sort of policy at a minimum that addresses how we deal with the perimeter walls or street-facing walls.
It's hard enough working with the neighbor just to try to repair a fence, and if the neighbor's the city and the property owner who doesn't want to cooperate, that's the other thing is, is it the city's responsibility to take on that full liability if the homeowner is unwilling to cooperate?
So there might be some hope, is what I heard.
Well, and Commissioner Stevens, I think there is hope because for those master plan communities going forward, so they do have to submit a minor plot plan for their fence and wall plan, and that's something that planning staff reviews, so we can ensure that moving forward that we're clarifying where those perimeter walls are being built and make sure that, we don't run into these issues in the future.
And that this isn't the right document or, design standards to put that in. It's more of a zoning
I
code.
think it's a higher level policy
Okay.
approach that we have to take, citywide that would apply to all of the new developments, master plans, or otherwise. And I think there's an application in some regard to commercial as well, because we do have large perimeter walls that go up with a lot of the commercial or industrial developments where, fortunately, they tend to not squawk at maintaining their own. It's not as much of a burden on them, but I think it's a policy that we could look at across the board.
Thank you both. Thank you.
I say, outside of California, there's a lot of places just don't even have fences and walls.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so thank you for staff for humoring us and take the time to go through that. Do we have any requests to speak on this item?
I don't have any written comments. Rudy, do we have any callers on the line?
I have no callers on the line.
Any further discussion? Okay, and do you need a vote on this, or is this just as workshop, or
It's
just looking
just
for discussion?
feedback, and
Okay.
so I took quite a few notes, so like I said, we'll be taking this to City Council at their meeting next week, so I'll give you an update at our next Planning Commission meeting.
Okay, well, thank you. I think this is really gonna help to establish, especially as we're, at a point now where a lot of the master plans are built out, as new people are coming in, looking for investment there. It gives a real clear view of what we expect as a community. And then we're not just going to accept somebody just throwing up four walls to be able to move in. It's, we want you to come here, but we want the investment to work both ways. So I think this is a real good thing to have. So I appreciate the time and effort that went into preparing this.
Thank you.
You guys did a good job.
I'd just like to add on that. I think it's a good timing as well with a lot of these communities, built in 2007 or, before, are the HOAs are even reviewing their own guidelines and CCNRs and updating those. We're going in the process. So this is, good timing and appreciated. This is great.
So with that, any comments from planning manager?
I have quite a few. I'm sorry. I know we've.
No, I'm happy to hear them.
Okay. So we've had a couple of council meetings since we last met. So I just wanted to kind of point out some items of note that might be of interest to the Planning Commission. So on March 21st, the City Council adopted the city's strategic plan. That strategic plan is on the city's website. They also approved an improvement deferral agreement for the TerraGen project, which some of you were on commission when that was approved. And this was regarding the deferral of offsite improvements associated with the relocation of the SCE transmission poles. On April 4th, staff, Deputy City Manager requested direction regarding proposed amendments to the Beaumont Municipal Sign Code and review in compliance with recent case law. And then on April 18th, the city entered into a lease agreement for the 4th Street Industrial Park. And so Public Works and Wastewater will be moving over there. And I only bring that to your attention because I know sometimes you'll come in and talk with staff. So they will be moving in the next month or so.
Wow, that's quite a ways away.
We've outgrown our space here
Mhm.
significantly, and PD has outgrown their space, so Public Works is gonna go down there, PD is gonna bring some of their folks over here. The reno on City Hall is, Nicole could speak better to that, I think maybe, but the reno on City Hall is gonna start, are you still? There you go. So we've had to, we added 23 positions this fiscal year, and we've got 18 more positions coming on in the fiscal year 24. So
Right.
we're just out of space.
If you're gonna move a group to off-site, Public Works, and we're such a rambunctious bunch, it's,
So the building is at 4th Street, just off of California, just west of California. It's the old West Coast electric building, so Bill Purcell's building. So a couple of the wastewater staff is going to go over there, but then all of Public Works is going to go there as well. So plenty of office space. There's room for a yard out there, so the Public Works staff can have their materials and equipment that they need.
Are you guys moving?
No, we're staying here. Yeah. And then, although I did like it, I was like, hey, we'd go down, but no, it was turned down. We're staying here. So the idea long-term is that the city will build a yard at the property adjacent to the wastewater plant, which the city also owns at Veely and 4th. And then Public Works wastewater will be housed there along with transit. It's a 6-acre-ish parcel, so there's room for the buses, and that allows us to have expansion space here as well for staff that grows. So it's a long-term plan that we've been finagling over the last year to see what's the best way, both monetarily and timing-wise, that we can work it to get the most bang for the buck and have some cost savings. And this is what ended up coming out.
this transit's on California right now, right? Or,
Yeah, they're on California, and then the buses are here in the evening, like when they're not running. So the California yard theoretically would move down as well to the Veely property, and then the city would have to decide what they're gonna do with that.
potentially
With that
opens it up for
property.
downtown development.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Where the old courthouse was down there.
Grace Street. So council back in October allocated significant amount of money. I want to say $1 million, maybe more, for some downtown work, and part of it was that building. So the community services staff, along with, I'm sure, some outside assistance, is going to be, I use the word gutting lightly, trying to restore that building to its initial. There's been some additions and weird stuff added on, so trying to get it back to its original structure. You know, the inside is beautiful with the beams and the.
It's the old courthouse.
Yeah, and so the idea is to get it back to a place where we can use it for somehow downtown, make it sort of a spur, have some synergy in there. So there's been a lot of interest actually from a variety of businesses, restaurants. It runs the gamut of actually people who have come and walked that building. Kyle has, I don't know how many times he's walked that building with people. So ultimately that will become part of the downtown.
Kyle walked that building when he was paying his fines down there.
That may also be the case. I don't know. But council has allocated funding already to address that and to try and make it.
And my understanding is the city owns the lots across the street where there's
The
parking.
parking.
Correct.
Correct.
Just curious.
Sorry for hijacking your comments there.
No, that's okay. I did want to add on to with the city hall remodel, so parking is going to be severely impacted with the lay-down yard. So just so you know, in the future, parking may be.
Across the street or in the
Yeah.
lot here. Yeah.
Also, the city council conducted 2 budget workshops. One occurred on April 18th, and then there was one last night. So we are proposing to bring the budget forward to council for the June 6th and June 20th meetings. So, that may be of interest to the commission. Some anticipated items that we're expecting to come before the Planning Commission this summer include the Orchard Logistics project, which is the old Dowling Ranch. Also Beaumont Point specific plan, which was formerly called Jackrabbit Trail. And then the general plan amendment cleanup. So I have a list of properties, particularly in specific plans where they had residential and commercial. In the general plan, they're all designated as residential. So I've got some cleanup to do, including Kyle's piece. So I'm hoping that, I can bring that forward soon. Some other updates include Assistant Planner Jillian and I went to the National American Planning Association in April in Philadelphia. And so I kind of wanted to touch on some of the courses I took, and I downloaded these PowerPoints. So if you want any of them, let me know. But some of the sessions I attended were ADUs Won't Save the World. We did do a 4-hour bus tour, and I do have the notes from that, but I just want to point out 2 comments. I'm going to kind of planning geek out on that. But so in Philadelphia, they had a great recession in 2008, and it prompted the city to take a step back and decide how to promote development. So the citizens voted to create a zoning code commission, which completely wrote the zoning code, last overhauled in 1960s. Philadelphia 2035, the city's comprehensive plan, was first to be undertaken since planning director Ed Bacon's plan in 1960, and the first that covered the entire city. And this is Kevin Bacon's dad was the planning director in Philadelphia for many years. So it was, I didn't know that. And then another interesting fact, the average population density of U.S. cities is about 3,000 residents per square mile, while in Philly it's 12,000 per square mile. And in South Philly and in the city center, it's close to 20,000 residents per square mile. The average lot size of a single-family home in Philly is only 1,100 square feet. So it was very interesting. So it was a very cool tour. Some of the other courses I took were critical communication skills for planners, planners bar legal risk aversion and best practices, storytelling, not yelling, towards more inclusive public engagement. And that was really great because it was like a investigative reporter, and it was a really interesting session. And then supporting equitable revitalization. All the planning staff also attended a virtual course put on by OPR, which is the Office of Planning and Research, called CEQA 202, that went over greenhouse gas analysis, and we did that on April 18th. Also, all planning staff, including the deputy city manager, the city manager, and Mayor Pro Tem Fenn, attended the Meritage Model Home event at the Fairways. And then on April 26th, myself, Kyle, our assistant fire marshal Kylie, we had several members from the police department and the mayor attend the Dutch Brothers cultural event the day before their opening, and so that was very interesting. Also, I wanted to bring to your attention, we're having a downtown revitalization workshop. It's going to be our first one. It's going to be next Thursday from 6 to 8 in room 4. And then the planners and myself will be doing a planning session on planning and sustainability on May 25th. Some other news, the planning department has put out RFP, a request for proposal for on-call planning services and environmental. We received 24 proposals.
I'm sorry.
We received a lot. We kind of whittled it down to 14 and then invited 8 back to, or actually 10 to interview. And so we are taking our proposal for 6 back to the city council at next week's meeting. We do currently only have 2 firms, but we're hoping to provide the opportunity. Sometimes the firms that we currently have want to pursue other clients, and there's a conflict of interest, and so it's providing them with some flexibility to get other work, but it also gives us the flexibility to give them more work, and it does include extension of staff at any time that we do need that if we're busy, but if we see a rush, it's either feast or famine. So we're excited to take that to council next week, so I'll give you an update on that as well. We are working on updates in our InterGov, which is our project and permitting system. So we're We are adding in time tracking ability, and so we're keeping track of times. We'll be putting in time for planning commission meetings and trying to recover costs that way. And then we had a fee study update, and we have new fees going into effect on July 1st. So I'm trying to get the word out to our developers, things are gonna change, so you guys might hear of things. And then I did want to confirm that you're all receiving the DRC agenda every week. So, and like I said, if you have any questions on that, you can reach out to me or the planners. We are happy to answer any questions you may have. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, I sit on a committee.
Mr. Jenkins.
I sit on a committee that we're designing the Memorial Plaza for the front of City Hall. And I think we're about to go out to an RFP on it. But it will change the entire front of City Hall to incorporate the Veterans Memorial and the Public Safety Memorial. And when that's completed, and it's down the road, but the council has committed some dollars to this. It will change the entire front of City Hall. Just to let you know, that's coming. We have, I think, and you can tell me, Deborah Seaman, I think we almost at the RFP stage right now. Yeah, we're about at the RFP stage. Doug from Park and Recs is working real hard on it, and it's gonna be a really nice facility.
That's exciting.
It's beautiful. I think the final design's maybe gonna come to council for them to see it and bless it, but yeah, committee's done an outstanding job. It's gonna be even better than
So the
we thought.
design's completed, we're going up for RFP to construct it.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
we have some water features, and the biggest thing was to make sure that the homeless couldn't show up, take a bath, and brush their teeth. So, it's really a neat setup, but Doug has worked real hard to make it work.
I'm very excited to see that come out, and I'll be very, very excited to see that project move forward. That'd be great.
Well, part of it is to encourage people to come and meditate
Right.
and reflect.
And to honor.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your work on that. Thank you. Any other comments?
Nope.
I have one. Are we dark in July?
Probably not.
Okay, I will be out of state.
So what I have for July tentatively, let me get out my roll. So tentatively, we have Beaumont Point for July 12th. So when are you out? You out the whole month, or?
We're leaving July 7, then we're coming back after 2 weeks.
So would you be here on July 26th?
I believe so. I only get 2 weeks off, so.
I can tell you where he's gonna be if you want.
Can you remote it? Oh, wait, no,
We can't do that anymore.
it's not an option.
Right. But no, yeah, I would be back for a second meeting if we had it that month. But yeah, I am on vacation.
Okay.
Well, now that we're talking about vacations, y'all be out July 4th through 16th.
So yeah, Commissioner Stevens is out the same.
We may then need to look at having the second meeting in July and being dark for our regularly scheduled second Wednesday, move it to the fourth Wednesday. Are you gonna be gone?
July 26th?
I'm gonna figure it out how to take a bath.
I'm just planning on meditating during lunch.
Okay. Well, thank you. Figure get that out now sooner rather so everybody knows.
No, I appreciate that, because we are, I'm looking at, some of these bigger projects, we're looking at tentative dates, so,
Right.
If we've got an issue with a quorum or, a project that large, I think that, we want to try to have the full commission, so
Agreed.
that's great, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. We will adjourn tonight at 7:59. Thank you.
I have a question.